Hello. Today's video we're going to be discussing setting up a submission form for Abstract Studio. First, let's identify the purpose of the submission form. It's basically to collect information from your contributors, submitters, authors, presenters, whatever the case may be, to come and speak at a conference or just submit a paper for publishing. In the submission form, you would basically have some questions that you want the submitter to answer and for you to make a decision on whether they should be approved or not, or other things that you may need to know about the conference setup. Some of the things you don't have to really put into the submission form itself would be profile type information, because when the person first logs into Abstract Studio, being that they're in your IMIS database, they would have all the profile information as you've set it up, where they have to verify it. So you're already going to have their email address. If you have the prefix, first, middle, last name, so on and so forth, you'll already have these fields. So those wouldn't be necessary to include in the submission form itself, because you already have that in your database. You can add additional fields to the profile area. That will be covered in another video. But this is just to give you an idea of questions that you do not have to necessarily ask in the submission form, because they're going to be in the profile. And the same would go for any co-presenters, co-authors that may be associated with the submission that's coming your way, because those individuals too will have the opportunity to either create a new profile for themselves in your database, or they may already exist in your database, at which point they would already have the profile information, so you wouldn't need to ask them additionally where do they work or what institution are they part of, what's their address, their biography information. So things to take into account with your submission form is think of what the purpose is of the form. I'm going to show you an example that I have of one of my other conferences. You may have a need for maybe one questionnaire would be for your oral presentations. You have a set of questions that cater to questions that you would have to ask someone that was going to speak at a conference. The difference may be that maybe for a poster presentation, your questionnaire might be somewhat smaller. You wouldn't have to ask them the same questions, perhaps, maybe how long a session is, so on and so forth. So you could actually set up an additional form for this conference, and then in your instruction set you would instruct the submitters that if you're submitting for an actual oral presentation, choose that appropriate form, or if you're just wanting to submit for a poster presentation, choose that form and fill out the questions that follow. So a previous video I did was setting up an event in IMIS, because this is IMIS driven, so this is based on the events that will appear that I can link my forms to will be based on what I have in IMIS. So see that video for setting up an event in IMIS. So one thing we're going to do is scroll down to the site administration area to actually start setting up this submission form. First step would be click on this Manage Submission Form Layouts. And you can see here I have quite a few forms set up, but we're going to make a new form. Incidentally, if I wanted to edit an existing form, I would just click on that form and then open the form definition button. So let's make a new form. And now we have the blank palette, so to speak, of a new submission form. First thing you'll want to do is name this form appropriately. I'm going to just name this Technology Technology Conference Submission. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put that in the form description as well. You can name that, you can put a different description there if you want. It would give you more information. For instance, I could put 2013 maybe for the 2013 conference. Although it's not normally recommended to set up a different form for each conference. With this application, you can actually set up a single form once you have it the way you want it, and then move forward with that conference to conference. So tabbing down, the next selection area will be the type of form here on the right. We have the four choices: a submission form, a session form, track, and program. this video is to talk about the submission form itself. So this is what we're going to work on. If you'll note, when I clicked on the submission button down below, you can see the different roles that become available that you can set up to be selectable by the submitter, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The next step in your form setup will be your title prompt. So you don't have to create a specific question asking someone to enter a title of their submission or of their paper or their speaking engagement. You're prompting the submitter for entering a title. So we've set it up so that you can ask that question any way you want. So I'll just keep it simple. I'll put semicolons there. The next step will be putting the max title length, and you can go up to 1,500 characters. I'm going to just do 250. I'll tab down. The next field is the form type. This is where I was showing you earlier, where you saw one selection was an oral presentation, the other was a poster presentation. So these are the choices we have below. This is actually set up in the general lookups area. Again, another video, another time. It is also discussed in the documentation if you wanted to brush up on that. So you can add and take away from these as you see fit. So I'm just going to make it very simple. I'm just going to make this for an oral presentation. And then you can see by default the form is active, it's viewable, editable, which means the person can come in and make updates to it after they've saved it. Allowing uploads. This application also allows people to upload a form or a presentation, PowerPoint, that has to do with their submission itself, and it will actually tie by the submission ID of the form. The next step is you're going to want to enter your open date when the form is going to be available. I'm just going to make this available as of yesterday. Now the edit cutoff date, that's if you wanted to allow someone that if they've met the submission date where they've actually entered a submission, and you want to have additional time for them to make any additional edits, you can put a date in there, or you can leave it blank. And then the close date is the date. So let's say you have a cutoff of from April 9th, you're going to take submissions until June 1st. You could actually set your date there where after June 1st, the form would no longer be available for anyone to edit new submissions. So you can have an automatic cutoff date on that. The submissions by form is a setting that you can limit how many times an individual can submit on this form. So, for instance, if I wanted to submit for the conference using this form and you had that set to 3, I would only be allowed 3 submissions for this conference on this submission form. Leaving it set at 0 is there's no limit at all, and most people go with that. The members only checkbox is a setting that they don't necessarily, it's not talking about their member type in your database, it's just that they have an IMIS ID in your database to tie to, and that you would, and it's usually tied with the create activity, so that in IMIS you can actually track when someone has submitted in Abstract Studio to speak at your conference, and you can see in their record in IMIS that activity of the submission and the upload of forms, so on and so forth. Next block down would be the invitees only. You could actually check this block where it wouldn't be available publicly for someone to submit. You would have to, as an administrator, invite them to come submit their submission on this submission form. The next area we're going to discuss are the different roles that are available. When your submitter makes their submission, they're going to answer the questions that you put on the form. After they save or submit the form for review, they'll come to a screen where they're going to select or add co-presenters or other participants that have to do with their submission. We have these 10 sets of different participant types that you can choose from. So let's just say, because this is an oral presentation, we're going to allow presenters and co-presenters. And in this case, we only want one lead presenter in this presentation. So I would change that from 0, which is unlimited, to a maximum of 1. And then for my co-presenters, we'll say that we would allow them to have up to 3. So it would be a total of 4 people associated with this work. Now if I wanted to have someone else involved, if I want to allow them to add someone else, maybe you have someone you want, the submitter wants to indicate that to handle all communications between your organization and this submission, they could annotate someone that they want to have receive the communications. You can use that. You can also add authors or co-authors if you want, or other participants. It's entirely up to you how you want to use that, but these are the controls as we've set them up, and don't select that box. So once you're done with all your changes and your updates here, you click on the Save button. And now the very beginning of your form has been created. The next step is to start adding your questions. So you start with clicking on the Make a New Question. And you have the basic form set up. Again, this is in the documentation, setting up submission forms. So you can review through that just to kind of brush up on that. You'll see by default your question is active. The sequence number is just where it falls in your questionnaire. This number should never be manually changed. It's an automatically numbered process. The next one will be the parent, which is used for parent-child questions, which will be the final, I believe it's the final question I'll be setting up in this video. The group is, you can group your questions, kind of like on a credit card form application, where you'll have your name information, you'll have your employment information, and it just kind of groups those questions underneath those headings. So your description question could be a simple instruction set explaining how to fill out the form. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to just put some simple text. Again, you can have any other instructions that you may want to add in there. And you'll come down. You'll want it, of course, viewable by the submitter. And you won't necessarily want instructions for the reviewers. What this is getting to is once your submissions are taken in, you can assign all of these submissions to your predetermined reviewers that will go through the submissions to see if they meet certain criteria or someone that you want to come speak at your conference. So in this case, we wouldn't want this instruction set to appear for the reviewers. They don't need to see that. And then all you have to do is click on the Update button. Once that's done, click on Close, refresh, and you can see your first question is created. Now incidentally, what you're seeing here on the left column is the 1.0 is just the first question in the form. The 609 is for database use. It's the question ID 609 in the questions part of your database. And then you can see a portion of your question text. If you want to make any edits to that, you would just click on the Edit button and then update as you want, and then click on the Update button and then close. Now, what I've done for time saving sake is I've pre-created some questions. You can copy and paste to this submission form tool as well. So I'm going to go to our predetermined questions. So I can see my first question is I want to choose the topic area. Topic area is a good question identifier type question for filtering use. So what we're going to do with this question is we're going to, from the drop down, choose that it's going to be a Dropbox type question. I'm going to choose topic area primary. This will make sense later on in your form setup, but this is going to allow you to use filter sets that are built into Abstract Studio later on for assigning reviews and searching for submissions through the process. Now you have the ability to make this a required question, which means before the person can submit this form for review, they must answer the question, which is basically choose an answer. You want it viewable to the submitter, and in this case you want it viewable by the reviewer, because as they're reviewing these submissions, they have to see what it is that the individual chose to see if it fits, if their submission fits that topic area. Again, using copy and paste. just going to put my answers, as you saw as I clicked save, the answer blocks showed up at the bottom. And add your question. You can either hit enter on your keyboard or actually click on the little diskette to the right, at which point the next answer prompt will appear. It out with something else. You can either edit it and make the change here on the line and save it, or you can actually click on the delete with a little trash can here, which will then delete the answer. Another thing this can do for you, if you want to reorder your questions. So if I click on the little triangle for enrollment management, you can see it refreshes, and that would be my first choice available on my submission form. So you don't have to rewrite the question. Once you're done on this page, you can close the window, and then when you refresh, you're going to see that you now have the two questions. And you would just continue going on down the line, adding your questions as you go through. The next question type is going to be the abstract question, where you're asking them to please enter their abstract text. So we copy the question. And you have the choice. You can choose this to be a WYSIWYG editor type question, which would be like Word, has the different tool sets and that for setting up your paragraphs, your different types of fonts and things like that. Or you can use a simple open text box, which then you wouldn't have to be concerned with someone using formatting that you don't want used in your setup. I'm going to go ahead and choose open text for now. And another question identifier, again for later better filtering, I would choose brochure description, which puts it in a certain place in your database so that it'll show up more readily for reporting. So you want it viewable by the submitter and reviewer. And as you can see, I have up to 400 words, approximately 4,000 characters and spaces. If you want to limit that, we average about 10 letters or characters per word, just for simple math. This has a character counter in it, not a word counter. So if you say only wanted 100 words in your abstract, you would limit it to approximately 1,000 characters, which you handle down here in the max length area. We're just going to leave that at 4,000 for now. So we'll click on Update. And for your open text box, you actually have to build the field size. The first one is, you usually use 100, that's the full width, or how wide your field box will be. And for a 4,000 character, you probably want that about 6 to 8 rows high so that you can see all of the text in the box. And then I'll show you what that's going to look like. When I go to View Questionnaire, I get a quick preview to get an idea of what my form is going to look like. Now the drop-down is not going to look like this. It's actually going to look like a regular drop-down box, but this is just so that you can see all the choices available. So as you can see, we set up our description question, which was the instructions. We set up the primary topic area question and our choices, and then where we're asking them to create their abstract or enter their abstract. So we'll just continue on and create our next question in the submission form. And we want to know if the individual is presented before. Let's copy and paste again. And this is going to be a yes or no question. So we'll select that from the question type. We're not going to use an identifier with that. We want that available to the submitter and the reviewer. And again, you can decide whether or not you want that question to be required, meaning you've got to have an answer to that before you could accept that submission. But in this case, I'm not going to make it required. An update. Once that's updated, you close. And we'll go to the next question. Because I selected yes, no question, those options are already showing up in that order, yes and no. Select a presentation format. Again, click on the new. We're going to make this a multiple choice question. Available to submitter and reviewer. And then we have two choices on our form here. Again, anything that you dictate you want to write questions for, this is how the tool works. So once I click on update and I've had multiple choice selected, the answer choices will appear at the bottom. And then 90 minutes. That. And this is where I wanted to show you how to do a parent-child type question. You can see the question that is, which choice best describes where you gained your experience in the topic you wish to present? And then it gives you three choices. Third choice being other. Maybe we don't know what that could be, so we've actually have it set up where we can provide a blank field below this question set, which would be a child question, or should I say child answer, for in the event that they chose other. So let's first set the question up. Make a question. Take care of my formatting here. Question type is going to be, we're starting with a multiple choice. Remember, we had a multiple choice type question. We want that available to the reviewer and the submitter. We're going to update, and then we're going to add our choices. And if you note, I have some italicized print there. You can do that if you want, and I'll show you that real quickly how you do that using HTML. Although it's not normally recommended in your answer choices you do HTML. So we'll just leave it at that. So now you can see we have the initial question set up. This is your parent question. And you note that it has the sequence number 6 at the top here. So we're going to go ahead and close this window. I'm going to refresh the page for you so you can see all the questions we've created so far. Okay. Now I'm going to make the new question. This is where we make the child question. So I'm going to choose the prompt. Paste it in there. So it's telling them, please provide the details of other I've chosen above. So we're going to want that to be an open text type box so they can type. And here's where you indicate what the parent question is. If you remember, that sequence number on the previous question was 6. You choose 6 from the drop down. You'll want that available to your submitter and reviewer. And I wouldn't think you'd want too many characters in that. So let's just limit that to, we'll say 100 characters. And we'll update that. And 100 characters should fit on a single line. It'll be at least 100 wide. And now that's been saved. So now when you look at your submission form, we'll go to the View Questionnaire button. And you can see as you go through, you have which choice best describes where you gained your experience on the topic you wish to present. And then if they chose other, they have an area here down below where they can actually provide the details of where they got that experience. So now you can see on this page that we've created these questions, and note on the left with the sequencing you have 6.0 and 6.1. What that's indicating is that's the parent-child question relationship. If I were to create another question, another child question, it would be 6.2. Once I move on to the question that follows that, it would actually be number 8, I believe. So once you have your question, your submission form set up, the next step in the process is going to be to link to the event, so it's actually going to show up for your event. Very simple process. We've already created the event in IMIS, so that it will appear in Abstract Studio. So again, you're back on the main page. You'd go to Site Administration, link submission forms to events. As you can see here on the top, the Technology Conference Submission 2013, that's the form we've been working on. And our event is showing here in the right column for the 2013 Technology Conference. Highlight the two, and I would click on Submit. If I wanted other forms to be available for that same conference, if I hold the left control key, I can select more than one form. In our case here, we're just going to select the single form, the single event, click on Submit. Now when we go to My Submissions, you'll now see the 2013 Technology Conference available for choosing. The 2013, and again, how this text appears in the window is how you've typed it into IMIS. As far as how it reads out 2013 Technology Conference, that's your title. Once I click on that event, now you're going to see the oral presentation submission form we just created from the available forms to be used to submit. When the user comes in, they log in, they read your instruction set, you click on Submit New, and now you can actually see the form as we've set it up. As you can see, here's your title prompt with the number of characters that you're limiting them to. Your instruction set, please answer the question to the best of your ability, your submission. Again, whatever your instructions would be, I'm sure you'd have more details to that. Your topic area, here's your drop-down question already created for you. Here's your abstract, where the individual is going to enter their submission, their abstract, what they're speaking about. Here's your yes/no question for whether or not they've presented, presentation format. Then here's your parent-child question. You have your, which describes where you gained your experience. If they chose other, then they would fill out their details in this field provided. So note the difference between the open text box here for the brochure or the abstract, where we entered row and height, and where here we just entered how wide we wanted it to actually be. The text that appears at the very bottom of your submission form, these are the instruction set that explains to the individuals how to use the buttons. There's actually a third button that I can turn on that would be actually saying submit for review. So someone could come in, save their submission, and it would leave it open indefinitely. Or once they click the submit for review, if that's your business rule, it locks the submission so they can't get in and make any additional changes until after the review process has been complete. Instructions on where to change that text are available in the documentation, and we can go through that in another video.